Well, good morning. So, we're in a new section. I really enjoy the way this is laid out, and I'd have to tell you, um, what's interesting is as I'm going to couch this. Well, this is a big. I'm going to couch this or talk about this in a particular way. Okay, I've been working with A Course in Miracles since 1986. That's almost 30 years now. And I've been working with it regularly. And it's written in a particular way and consistently. Now, what I'm going to say is this: consistently throughout the years, when people come to A Course in Miracles, and it seems to happen, there are waves. There are waves of people who come to A Course in Miracles, and everyone goes through the same experience. Everyone goes through the same experience from their own perspective. I was talking. I don't know what we were having a conversation on the internet, and something came up, and I understood. There's a teacher named Candace O'Denver, and she says one of the things that she claims, she's not a teacher of A Course in Miracles, and she's been around for a while. She's out here in California, and there are many who have read her stuff, and actually she has a following. One of the things that she says, and I like the expression, I'm not entirely sure if she and I both understand it the same way, but I like the expression. She understands that in awareness contains all perspectives. Okay. It's the same idea as, a diamond has many facets. And they're all equally true in their expression of themselves when they're expressing the light. And yet when they're expressing the light, there's some light recognition that takes place within each of the expression. When they're expressing the ego or darkness and consciousness itself, let's call it consciousness. Consciousness as the domain of the ego contains all perspectives of separation, let's call it. All perspectives of separation rather than all extensions of a true light. Okay? Now, everyone, as they awaken, as they come to this process, goes through a very similar sort of undoing. And in the back of the manuals for teachers, Jesus discusses this. There's levels of trust. There's levels of development, and you get to a level, and and the first time you get to one of these levels of rest, you really have a sense that you're done, and you're given the rest, and it's a period of consolidation, where as you step back into the rest and allow your mind to reorganize yourself, that which is valuable remains, and that which is no longer valuable in your new recognition of yourself departs because it has no place within your consciousness. And then a new set of circumstances develops because you project a new set of circumstance within the consciousness that contains all perspectives. Okay? Now get away from form association, although utilize the form association as well. Think of yourself as an energetic projector of imagery. And what you see constantly, what happens at the imagery as you're using it to heal your mind is, as your mind is refined, and refined I mean by loosening yourself from being defined in your own mind through limitation. What's always left is the residual of the falsity of your own association with yourself and with the world, which is what requires healing. Okay? So you're always dealing with the falsity within the material aspect of the healing that seems to be consciousness perspective, a consciousness which contains all perspectives of separation, let's say. Now, awareness, which contains the extension of all facets of reality. There's no conflict and there's constant communication. Okay, so I like Candace O'Denver's idea because it works both ways for me in the hourglass side. Okay. So now there's been these waves that I've watched for 30 years, and everybody goes through the same thing, and it's becoming interesting because the longer time goes by, the first and second wave gets less and less. Remember, the initial people do, and then which is cool because and you learn. You learn by experience what worked and what didn't work in your own expression as you refine who you are within God's plan for salvation. And salvation is what we're dealing with today. What is salvation? So it's interesting to have been watching for these 30 years as people become and pick up A Course in Miracles. I just got an email or a message from a friend of mine in Australia. She said she can't believe there's a resurgence. And there's going to be more and more resurgences. There's going to be more and more resurgences as we purge ourselves of our lack of love or our sins of omission of love. Let's call a sin. It's a sin of omission. A sin is an omission of love in your perspective. And when you add love, you become part of the extension. So we're healing, and salvation is a big one for me. But it is interesting to watch as it moves along, and people take it and they do the same thing over and over again. And there are particular, the mind only works one way, so it's only capable of certain extrapolations and certain experiences, and those are the ones that are important to us. And salvation, to me, was the big one. But what I wanted to say is this: in my experience of A Course in Miracles, everybody throughout these like surges, there's a surge, and there's when people begin the surge, what has been clear is the beginning of A Course in Miracles, the way it was published by Ken Wapnick, was very difficult. And as you come, this was for me the way it was more difficult, and it got less and less difficult, and the English got more and more plain as time went on. And it wasn't because Helen was a rusty pipe. It's because your mind is getting healed, and you don't even notice the healing that's taking place as you refine your mind, which is why the need for words gets less and less. Has nothing to do with being a rusty pipe for Helen. What it has to do with is the necessity for the healing of my mind to take place within the stages, and it takes place in everyone in the same way. I could say as well. Now, salvation played a key role because in my initial encounter, I recognized that I was saved. And this is an incredible statement as to salvation. Now, as much as the beginning of the book seems complex when you're new, as you heal and refine your mind, as you get to the back, the English gets more and more plain. Yet it is incredibly rhythmic and rhyming throughout. And then the teacher's manual is just a plain conversation between equals, which is what it's meant to be, because your mind has been healed and you're recognizing this. Now, where one starts, who really knows? Whether you start, that's what there's a question. There's a question about some people, it's better they start with the text. Some people, it's better they start with the workbook. Some people, it's better they wherever, just start, and you will be guided. Because you're turning over day by day. You're turning it over in a place that you don't recognize until it starts to come together in experience on a daily basis. And you see what's gone on within yourself because you recognize how different you are from the new perspective that you've been given within the totality of perspectives. So when people have questions, when people have conceptual questions about certain things, and their themes, and that's what the back of this is. When people have particular conceptual questions about certain themes that are contained within the Course, I have found that the best answers to their conceptual questions and the most understandable in plain English to them can be found in these things like what is forgiveness, what is salvation, as well as when something particular is dealt with in the Manual for Teachers. Because it's said in such a familiar way and tone that it allows someone to read it without their mind having to go through the unscramble. Now, if they go back, it's going to be a little bit different experience. but it doesn't matter. Wherever you start is okay. Salvation is a promise. Now, this was a perfect expression of my experience of salvation. And when it happened last night, the same thing that happened with me in the course when I first picked it up, I knew this was for me. It didn't matter whether anybody else read it, anybody else got it. I knew this was a personal message, as promised, in my period of revelation, in my communication with Jesus, in my experience of God revealing himself as they continue. The thing that I have found to be true is this has always been a personal message to me. I hear it that way. I know other people like it. It doesn't matter how to me. All that matters to me, and I'm excited when they get excited by it, and I'm excited when they begin to glean what it's talking about, and I'm excited by their experiences, and I love when we can share experiences and not conflict conceptually and get beyond the concepts. But I've known since day one, when Jesus promised me in my revelation, God's revealing himself to me, and in our initial communication at the time we spent out of time together in those initial days back in 1986 in California, out of space and time. The thing that I knew was that this was meant for me. It didn't matter about anyone else. It's very personal to me, and when I read this, it's ultra personal. I don't know how you're meant to take it. I can't take it another way. I understand within the reflection of Jesus as perfect, I come nowhere near what he seems to be in my own mind nor in anyone else's. That's no concern to me. My concern is in the communication when he said to me, there will be directions. I was certain that these were the directions. And I'm certain that the concepts that he deals with in the back are dealt with in a way that anyone who has any reasonability and objective mind can read these and understand perfectly well exactly what they say. Then they can reject them or accept them or utilize them or not. It doesn't matter. But these are very simple. Salvation is a promise made by God that you will find your way to him at last, and that's exactly what happened. It cannot not be kept. It guarantees that time will have an end, and time does. It did, it will, and you will see the end. And that time is always now. And all the thoughts that have been born in time will end as well. God's word is given every mind which thinks that it has separate thoughts and will replace these thoughts of conflict with the thoughts of peace. And that's what we're constantly seeing in the refining of our hearts and minds, through the releasing ourselves from the defining, from the definitions of our hearts and minds. We're constantly dealing with the residual, because true thoughts fly home, and only thoughts of separation remain within consciousness. And we're dealing with our own thoughts of separation within the consciousness of space-time, which contains the totality of perspectives of separation, that we're freeing ourselves and our brother as we allow things to be made straight and straighten away and narrow the gate. And as we still our minds here, this ball, as I was shown, this ball of rubber bands, as we forgive, the tension looses and it can unwind and unravel in the stillness, and we're whole and perfect, and we recognize that. The thought of peace was given to God's Son. The instant his mind had thought of war, it would have to be, because there was no need for such a thought before, for peace was given without opposite, and merely was. But when the mind is split, there is need of healing. Okay, I want everybody to understand it is no sin, it is no degradation of who you are as either a person in space and time or as the Holy Son of God in reality, to admit that your mind is split and needs healing. It's very simple to see in the way you think and experience yourself, but the admission of having a split mind will actually explain your experience more readily than the non-admission and the continued attempt to defend yourself against that as a fact. I understand conceptually everyone's whole and perfect, but I understand here as well everyone's mind is split, and it is the healing of the split in our individual mind, what operates in every thought, because we're constantly dealing with the residual. We allow our heart and our mind to stop operating out of sync, out of uniform, based on the split, and begin to operate in unison, in harmony, based on the certainty of the soul as being whole and perfect. We change that to the service of the soul rather than the service of the split or the ego. And now we begin to shine away all those perspectives of separation that are contained within consciousness. And the more we do it, and the brighter it gets. Our brothers may get more fearful, but the more readily available the light is for their own instant of conversion to be as total as possible within the healing of the mind of the separate Son of God. The admission that your mind is split and needs healing is important. When the healing comes and it's no longer split, you will know it. You will begin to experience moments where you're certain it's not split and the wholeness of your own self. And then you will lose that in the experience and the mundanity of the necessity to continue to forgive 7 times 7 times 70. And you will gain that experience again when you do forgive. And that's the process until there is nothing left. And space and time simply disappears. This is salvation is undoing in the sense that it does nothing, failing to support the world of dreams and malice. Thus it lets illusion go. By not supporting them, it merely lets them quietly go down to dust. Now, understand the not supporting of the illusion of space and time in the conflictual nature of consciousness when it's being utilized by the entirety of the separate sonship in the fragmentation presents conflictual associations that are brought to you and viewed by you. Okay? You don't have to, in a sense, always address the situation to be able to say yes to your brother if he asks you a question, because you know the back of your mind, what's truly happening is always the healing of your brother's heart and mind, because the nature of the separation and the illusion that they're bringing to you is false. And you don't verify it, but you verify it by denying yourself the power to be whole and perfect and enter into it, to bring that wholeness and perfection to the thing. It doesn't matter how you talk about it, as long as you know it doesn't affect your own wholeness and perfection, not as a concept, but as an experience. But even as a concept, it would allow you to discuss everything from the wholeness and perspective. You don't have to teach other people concepts in order for you to recognize within the nature of your relationship and not validate or support their illusion. And you could offer them compassion, you could offer them love, you could offer them hope, but you cannot offer them that and concepts as well, because concepts are the bar to love. You cannot offer people concepts unless they ask and become open, but you can't offer them love. Concepts don't heal. Releasing your mind from concepts and offering love is the healing energy through the grace of God that you offer your brother. You don't commiserate because you think the dream is true. You free from the compassionate heart of love that freed you, your brother, from the necessity of having to continue to suffer, not through offering a concept, but through just offering him your presence, your willingness to listen and say yes to him. This becomes easy as you experience salvation. This is a perfect description. I'm taking a lot of time here today. From here we give let us come daily to this holy place and spend the while together. This is what I do. Now, I'm always questioning myself because I'm always living within the residual consciousness wherein which the perspectives of separation reign and healing is taking place. I always operate from within that. So I'm always questioning everything that's going on, even though I know there's an awakened perspective that gives me the ability to question that. But what I have found out when I do these lessons and read these the second time is that because of the nature of salvation in my experience, this is second nature. I didn't need to be trained. The fact that I could go to this holy spot where salvation occurred in my own heart and mind, and I could even go and sit in the place as a location as well, as a holy spot within my own within the consciousness I utilize, and remember and be one, and allow that experience. And one of the things I was taught was how to remove the frame of space and time that encapsulates the energy of these experiences if they're past, and have them be present within your consciousness without after rebuilding that frame and time of separation that you think allowed them to occur, because it's always an action within your mind. It's never part of space and time. Nothing happens because of space and time. It happens because of willingness and the actions of your mind. And this is a manual for how to utilize your mind. Father, lesson 231. Father, I will but to remember you. And after salvation occurs in your experience, and salvation definitely includes the perspective where all perspectives disappear into a single healing moment, and there's a restoration to the extensive nature of creation, and that bubble of consciousness wherein which all perspectives of separation were contained disappears because it's entirely healed. That's a perspective that's offered to you from the experience of salvation, in the midst of the idea that you're likewise participating in the healing yourself for your own purpose, for your own as well. We're working to a purpose that's already occurred. In that sense, we're going backwards. It doesn't matter which direction. I can see and feel, experience it in my mind, because I'm certain of it, and I've been returning to that daily. This just reminds me that in the experience itself, that the directions are contained. And now the directions, since they were given me, are being imbued with all of our energies of recognition of that it's working, and in fact it did work. And reading this today was a reminder of the fact that it did work, and it's a joy to read these every day with you. What can I seek for, Father, but your love? Yes, God is but love, and therefore so am I. Revelation is an intensely personal experience of God communicating his love directly to you, to the extent that you could stand it. When he communicates it to you and you lose all definition of yourself, and you're beyond the idea of separation, restored to the kingdom where the light and love of God is formless in the sense that we know it here in space, what form in space and time, then you'll see that there is nothing else to seek for but your love. When I had that revelation, I recognized, when God revealed himself to me, I recognized that I had always been looking for that. And now that I no longer had to seek it, God is but love, and that's all we're attempting to do. Even people here are attempting to restore themselves to the pristine state of being a child. That's what we're trying to do, except not within the limited vibratory frequency of the perspectives of separation that are contained within consciousness, but within the totality of the recognition that we are the extension of that of reality itself, and there is no bounds. There's nothing to contain us. It's the totality of our reality. There is only God's love, and that solves every problem. And you can sink into that no matter what's going on around you, as long as you remember. And this course is a course that we utilize in the remembering, in the forgetting, and a way to remember as the bottom. Your love, the only thing I seek or ever sought, for there is nothing else that I could ever really find. Of course not. God is but love, and therefore so am I. God is everything. God is in everything. God is in your mind. If God is in everything, and God is but love, and therefore so am I, and peace and love and truth are one and the same thing, then there is only God, love, peace, and truth. They're all the same. You don't need definition. We could utilize some starting point of an admission of God, attributes of God, and match attributes of anti-God based on the attributes we give God, and vice versa. But if we utilize love, when you find it out, you'll know what the word love means. Let me put it that way. When you have that experience, you'll know what love means, and you'll know that there is no love but that love. And you'll seek for that love, having found that love, and then you'll begin to see that love all around, because you'll recognize the love within yourself, because you'll want to go back each day, as this is saying. You'll want to go back each day. this is your will, my brother, and you share that will with me. And of course, where the separation is healed between two brothers who thought they were in separation within consciousness, where that is healed, then the totality of it is healed, because that of separation is healed, and we're restored to reality. That's the experience many of you have had, many of you are in store for, and many of you begin to glean now within the recognition and are working your way back to, so that you can advance as you go back to the recognition that's always been in your mind. To remember him is heaven. This we seek. And only this is what it will be given as a sign. Of course, that's all there actually is. Go forth and be whole and perfect as your Father in heaven created you whole and perfect. And when you experience moments of wholeness, when you experience moments that seem to contradict that, utilize forgiveness. Okay? And when you utilize forgiveness, you'll recognize that you've been saved, because none of those conditions actually existed. And the totality of the acceptance of forgiveness is a joy that you'll never forget, and you'll want to remember it every day, especially when you're faced still with the conditions of the residual of your own and all of our lack of healing that still is taking place. And that's why we're here. It's a joy to be here, to do that, to participate, because we know both the beginning and the end. And beyond the beginning, before there was, beyond the beginning and end, before it was. And we're holding ourselves within that framework, within that perspective, and we're brightening the totality of the consciousness of separation, offering this new whole perspective, where the false is false and the true is true, and never the two will meet, and yet they both can be contained in mind, because the distinction has been made, not by us, but by the Holy Spirit, whom we've joined in the totality of our reconnection with our reality. Because, why? His Father is but, I will but to remember you today.